In the quiet hours of the night, when the world softens and the stars settle gently over the sleeping earth, there exists a Rome that few remember. Not the Rome of clashing swords, roaring crowds, or marching legions, but a Rome that breathed softly, like a mother humming to her child. A Rome woven from warm lamplight, terracotta walls, olive groves, and the sound of distant fountains whispering their ancient lullabies. Tonight, we step into that Rome. A Rome where women carried stories older than the empire itself. Where bakers woke before sunrise to knead dough under flickering clay lamps. Where children laughed in narrow stone alleys, chasing shadows cast by vines. And where tired fathers returned home with dust on their sandals, but peace in their hearts. This is the Rome you weren't taught. The Rome that lived quietly behind every triumph. In the scent of warm bread. In the murmurs of courtyard gatherings. In the gentle rituals of families trying simply to live. When most tell the tale of ancient Rome, they speak of emperors and battles. But Rome was more than that. Rome was human. It was the soft clatter of clay cups in early morning markets. The rustle of linen garments drying in courtyard breezes. The hushed whispers of women sharing secrets over woven baskets. The laughter of children echoing between marble pillars. The distant chanting of priests drifting through incense-filled air. And above all, Rome was a place where people sought the same things we seek today. Warmth, family, food, safety, rest. In this gentle retelling, we will journey through 1,000 small details that made up the everyday life of ordinary Romans. Women, mothers, daughters, widows, slaves, freedwomen, grandmothers, whose voices rarely reached the history books, but whose hands shaped the world more quietly and more completely than any emperor. Tonight, you will meet Livia, not a queen, not a noblewoman, just a simple Roman mother whose days were filled with cooking porridge, lighting oil lamps, and watching over her sleeping children. You will walk with Aurelia, a young girl learning to weave wool under her grandmother's guidance, dreaming of a future beyond the city walls. You will listen to Marcia, the elderly healer whose tiny courtyard garden smelled of rosemary and warm soil. You will sit with Julia, a widow who found solace in tending to the neighborhood fountain long after her husband passed away. These were the women who carried Rome on their shoulders. Not with swords, but with tenderness. Not with conquest, but with care. Not with war, but with life. Their stories are quiet. Their memories soft. But their impact eternal. As the night deepens and your breath slows into a gentle rhythm, this story will wrap around you like a woolen Roman cloak, warm, comforting, steady. The scenes will unfold slowly, peacefully, guiding your mind away from the noise of the modern world, away from worries, away from the sharp edges of reality, and into a time where life moved with the rhythm of footsteps on stone, the bubbling of fountains, the rustling of olive branches in the wind. Close your eyes. Imagine the warm glow of an oil lamp flickering against ancient walls. Imagine the soft crunch of gravel beneath sandals. Imagine a quiet Roman evening where laundry sways gently in the courtyard breeze, and the sky above the city blushes with fading pink. This is not a story of war. This is a story of life. Of Rome as it truly felt, gentle, human, peaceful. And as you drift deeper into this sleepy world, let the ancient city embrace you with all its warmth. Let the sounds, scents, colors, and faces of forgotten Romans gently carry you toward rest. Because history is not just what happened. History is also how people lived, loved, slept, dreamed, and survived. Welcome to a softer Rome. A quieter Rome. A Rome built not by emperors, but by the gentle hands of everyday souls. Tonight, we walk among them. The first light of dawn drifted gently over the terracotta rooftops of ancient Rome, spilling golden warmth into the narrow alleys still wrapped in silence. Before the bustling city awakened, Rome belonged to the soft footsteps of women, to the muted hum of early chores, to the steady rhythm of a civilization just beginning to stir. Livia was one of those early risers. Not because she wanted to be, but because life in Rome had always belonged to those who greeted the morning before the sun fully claimed the sky. Her small domus, tucked between a baker's shop and an herbalist's corner stall, held the familiar scent of olive oil, clay, warm linen, and faint traces of yesterday's bread. Livia's sandals whispered across the mosaic floor as she moved slowly, careful not to wake her sleeping daughters curled on a shared straw mattress. She paused for a moment, watching them. Two small bodies tangled in wool blankets, their tiny breaths rising and falling like soft waves against an unseen shore. A mother's quiet joy lived in that sight. The joy of knowing her children slept deeply, safely, peacefully, in a world that was often anything but gentle. The city beyond her door was still in its slow and quiet breathing. Somewhere down the alley, a clay lamp flickered to life. A neighbor hushed a crying baby. A cartwheel creaked as a farmer made his way toward the forum before the streets grew crowded. Livia reached for the amphora of water, lifted it carefully, and poured some into a shallow bowl. Her fingers brushed over the cool surface. She washed her face, tied her hair into a simple knot, and wrapped a wool shawl around her shoulders. Another day. Another dawn. Another chapter in a life made not of triumphs, but of tiny rituals repeated for generations. Outside, the first bakery ovens roared awake. Warm air drifted across the alley, carrying the scent of rising dough. Livia stepped outside for a moment, letting the morning breeze touch her face. She loved this hour, before Rome grew loud, before news from the Senate echoed through the streets, before arguments, trades, laughter, and chaos replaced the soft stillness that made dawn feel sacred. Her neighbor, old Marcia, was already awake. The elderly healer stood near her doorway, grinding herbs in a mortar with her wrinkled hands moving in slow circles. "You rise before the sun again," Marcia rasped with a gentle smile. "And you rise before me," Livia replied, returning the smile with tired eyes. Marcia nodded. Time doesn't let women sleep long. They shared a brief understanding. The silent bond of Roman women, whose days belonged to family, patience, and work unseen by history. Livia stepped back inside to prepare breakfast. Barley porridge, figs, a drizzle of honey if there was enough left. Each movement was slow, calm, deliberate. She lit a small oil lamp for extra light and stirred the pot with a wooden spoon worn smooth from years of use. As the warm aroma filled the house, her daughters stirred awake. "Mama, is it morning?" The younger one rubbed her eyes with tiny fists. "Yes, little dove, morning is here." The girl sat up, her hair a wild mess, her cheeks still rosy from sleep. Livia's heart softened. She placed a gentle kiss on her daughter's forehead and handed her a clay cup of warm water. The older girl stretched her arms. "I heard the baker," she murmured. "The bread smells sweet today." Livia smiled. "You may fetch some later, but first we eat together." Together. It was the only word that mattered. They sat around the low wooden table. Steam rose from the porridge bowl. Livia served her daughters first, then herself last, an unspoken rule in every Roman household led by women. Outside, the city began to wake fully. Voices layered over one another. Merchants opened their doors. Goats bleated. The clang of metal echoed from blacksmith workshops. And in the distance, the grand temple bells began to toll. Rome was alive again. Livia swept the floor after breakfast, the bristles of the broom whispering across the tiles. She folded blankets, shook laundry, rinsed clay bowls, and set them beside the window to dry. The sunlight fell on her hands, highlighting the tiny scars and calluses, marks of a life built through quiet strength, not recorded in scrolls or celebrated in marble statues. Her daughters played near the doorway, tracing small shapes on the dusty ground with sticks. One drew a tiny sun, the other drew a crooked house. Life felt peaceful. And yet, every peaceful morning in Rome carried the weight of uncertainty. The empire was vast, powerful, unpredictable. News from the Forum could change a family's future in a heartbeat. But Livia focused only on today. On the warmth of her daughters. On the gentle rhythm of chores. On the promise of a day without misfortune. She tied the shawl tighter around her shoulders. A soft breeze entered the doorway, carrying the scent of olives, bread, and distant sea air. Rome in this hour felt like a cradle. A city holding its people close, whispering ancient lullabies through its stone arches and cobbled streets. And as Livia stepped toward the courtyard with her daughters following behind, the day unfolded slowly. Like a story written not in ink, but in sunlight. The courtyard behind Livia's small home was one of those hidden pockets of Rome that felt older than the empire itself. Sunlight spilled softly over the stone walls, warm and golden, settling onto the clay pots lined neatly in rows. Rosemary, sage, fennel, mint, herbs that kept the household alive through every season. This courtyard was not large, nor grand, nor impressive. But it was a world of women. A world where stories were told without scrolls. Where wisdom was passed without teachers. Where history grew quietly like the vines climbing the ancient walls. Livia pushed open the wooden door, its hinges groaning gently. Her daughters hurried ahead, chasing each other between the pots, their laughter echoing through the still morning air. Marcia, the old healer, soon entered through her side gate, carrying a bundle of fresh leaves and a clay jar of crushed olive paste. "You woke the sun," Marcia said to Livia, settling onto a low stone bench. "The children woke me," Livia smiled. Soon after, 2 more women joined them. Aurelia, barely 20, with dark braids and hopeful eyes. And Flavia, a widow whose calm strength pulled people toward her like a quiet tide. This courtyard was their sanctuary. A place where Roman women could breathe. Aurelia sank down next to Livia. "My loom broke again," she sighed. "The threads refused to listen." Marcia chuckled. "Threads are like men. The more you pull, the more they tangle. Speak softly to them, then they obey." Aurelia giggled behind her hand, cheeks warming. Livia picked up a woven basket filled with figs. "You have patience, Aurelia. That is more than most people your age." The young woman exhaled, leaning her head against the wall. "I want to weave like the women in the villa houses. Fine wool, bright dyes, cloth that nobles pay for, but at home." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Every woman in that courtyard understood. Dreams often had to wait behind chores. Flavia had been silent until now, hands folded in her lap. Her face, framed by loose curls, carried a kind of beauty shaped by sorrow. "What weighs on your mind?" Livia asked gently. Flavia hesitated. "It's been 3 years since my husband passed. Yet, sometimes I still hear him turning the door handle at night." Her voice trembled slightly, like a leaf in soft wind. Oralia reached over and squeezed her arm. "You're not alone." "No," Flavia whispered, "but loneliness visits even when people do." Silence settled in the courtyard. Not heavy, just honest. The kind of silence that women shared when words ran out. Above them, laundry swayed in the light breeze, linen tunics, worn shawls, children's small garments fluttering like soft white birds. Soon Livia's daughters brought wildflowers they had plucked from near the wall. "For you, Mama. For Grandma Marcia. For everyone." Oralia tucked one behind her ear. Flavia placed hers gently inside her shawl. Marcia crushed one petal in her palm, inhaling its faint fragrance. "These little things," the healer said, "make life bearable." "And beautiful," Livia added. They worked together as the morning unfolded. Oralia helped repair the broken loom. Flavia washed clothes, her movements slow but steady. Livia prepared flatbread dough, her daughters shaping small circles with their tiny hands. Marcia hung bundles of herbs in the sun to dry, whispering old spells that were really just prayers disguised as tradition. From the outside, someone might have seen only a group of women passing a quiet morning. But Rome was built on these mornings. On these hands. On these unrecorded labors. Oralia suddenly asked, "Do you ever wish you lived somewhere else?" Livia paused, dusting flour from her fingers. "Where would I go?" "I don't know," Oralia shrugged. "Somewhere quieter, by the sea maybe." Flavia smiled sadly. "Rome is noisy, but loneliness is louder." Marcia tapped her cane on the ground. "Child, home is not a place. Home is people. If you take none with you, you take nothing." Oralia fell silent, absorbing the words. At that moment, a soft knock sounded at the courtyard gate. Livia rose to open it. Standing outside was Lucia, the local potter's wife, her face flushed, her breath uneven, worry tightening the corners of her eyes. "Livia," she whispered urgently, "I need help." "What happened?" Lucia stepped inside, lowering her voice. "My son, he fell near the market stall. His leg is swollen, he can't walk." Marcia immediately stood despite her age. Bring him here." Lucia's eyes welled. "I didn't want to trouble you." Flavia stepped forward. "We are women, we're made to carry each other." Within moments, the courtyard became a healing ground. Women fetched warm water, cloths, herbs. Marcia knelt beside the injured boy as the others steadied him. Oralia whispered, "Men go to war, but women fight battles every day." "Quiet ones," Livia agreed, "but no less fierce." When the boy finally calmed, and his leg was wrapped with careful precision, Lucia held Livia's hands with gratitude. "You saved him." Livia shook her head. "Not me, we did." Lucia hugged her tightly before leaving. As the courtyard settled back into its gentle rhythm, the women shared a moment of quiet pride. These hands, these hearts, was Rome. The Rome that survived, even when empires fell. The Rome that built itself anew every morning with soft strength. And as midday light poured over the courtyard walls, Livia looked around at the women she knew, admired, depended on women who would never be carved into marble, yet held a civilization in their arms. She thought. Before the roosters called out to the waking streets, before the vendors' wheels creaked across the stones, Before the sun even decided whether it wished to rise, the women of Livia's neighborhood were already awake. Rome slept late, but its women rose early. They were the quiet machines that kept the city breathing. This morning, Livia's courtyard smelled of yeast and warm water. A clay bowl of flour sat on the stone table, and beside it, a jug of olive oil that reflected the faint torchlight. Aurelia rubbed sleep from her eyes. "You bake this early every day." Livia laughed softly. "Bread doesn't make itself, and children don't wait." Across the courtyard, Flavia was heating the small clay oven, her sleeves rolled high, her expression steady and focused. The fire glowed like a gentle sunrise long before the real one touched the rooftops of Rome. Marcia arrived last, leaning on her cane. "I brought barley flour, better for the little ones." She set down the sack, breathing heavily, "Also better for old bones like mine." The courtyard warmed with low voices, soft footsteps, and the rhythmic kneading of dough. Livia pressed the mixture with calm, practiced motions, heel of the palm, push, fold, repeat. Aurelia watched, fascinated. "You make it look so easy," she said. "It becomes easy if you stop fighting it," Livia replied. "Dough is like life. If you force it, it tears. If you guide it, it rises." Flavia smiled at that. "Livia speaks more wisdom than half the senators." "Senators talk," Marcia muttered. "Women make things." Aurelia laughed, the sound bright in the cool morning air. The small oven crackled as Flavia slid the first round of dough inside. Heat shimmered. The courtyard glowed softly. Somewhere outside, a street dog barked, followed by the far-off calls of traders preparing for the day. Aurelia sat beside Livia. "When I was a child, I used to think Rome was built by emperors." Livia raised a brow. "And now?" "Now I think it was built," Aurelia said slowly, "by women with flour on their hands." Marcia tapped her cane. "Finally, she's learning." They all laughed quietly, careful not to wake the children still curled on their straw mats inside. After a moment, Aurelia asked the question she had been holding for days. "Livia, did you always want this life? Marriage, children, work, responsibility?" Livia paused, her hands still deep in dough. "I wanted a peaceful life," she said. "Not a perfect one. Peace is rarer than perfection." Aurelia considered that. "And did you find it?" "Some days," Livia answered honestly. "Other days, I chase it like wind." Flavia looked up from the oven. "I envy that honesty." Aurelia sat up a little. "What did you dream of, Flavia, before everything?" Flavia hesitated. "Not from secrecy, but from remembering." "I wanted to be a painter," she whispered. "I used to mix crushed flowers for colors. My husband said art was childish, that I should focus on the home. After he passed, I never tried again. It felt too late." Silence spread like a thin cloth over the courtyard. Then Livia reached out and touched Flavia's hand. "It is never too late. Paint if you want. Paint the walls, paint the sky, paint your grief. Paint because you lived." Aurelia nodded fiercely. "I would love to see your art." Flavia blinked, her eyes suddenly bright. "No one ever asked to." "You're asked now," Livia said gently. And something softened inside Flavia's chest. As the women continued working, the first tray of bread came out steaming, golden, soft. Aurelia tore a tiny piece and placed it in her mouth, smiling with her whole face. "It tastes like home," she whispered. Livia shook her head. It tastes like effort. Home is what effort becomes. The sky slowly shifted from blue-black to a tender gray. Birds fluttered onto the stone wall. Someone down the street began sweeping the front of their shop. The distant clang of metal told them the blacksmith had begun his morning. Rome was stretching awake. But here, in this courtyard, in this small pocket of gentle life, the women had already lived a full morning. And they were not finished yet. Lucia arrived carrying her mended basket. "You're baking early again." Livia smiled. "Always." Lucia accepted a warm loaf. "My husband says your bread tastes better than the ones in the market." Flavia raised a brow. "Tell him to keep saying that. Men behave better when their mouths are full." Everyone burst into soft laughter. Lucia looked around at the women, then lowered her voice. "You know, my daughters want to join you someday. They say your courtyard feels safe." "It is safe," Livia said simply. "For anyone." Lucia breathed out a shaky sigh. "They need that. Girls grow up fast in Rome, too fast." Marcia nodded. "Then let them come. Let them learn. Let them belong." Lucia smiled gratefully before stepping back into the street. Aurelia whispered, "We should teach the girls what no one taught us." Livia looked at her proud. "We will." As the second batch of bread went into the oven, sunlight finally spilled over the edge of the wall, painting their faces gold. Warmth settled over them, not just from the fire, but from each other. This was their empire. Not marbles. Not armies. Not triumphs. But hands shaping dough. Hearts shaping futures. Women shaping Rome quietly, gently, consistently. History would forget their names. But the city would never forget their work. The sun had finally pushed itself fully above the rooftops of Rome, sending gold across the narrow streets like spilled honey. Morning noises began to rise, not loud, not chaotic yet, but steadily growing, like waves warming themselves before touching the shore. Livia wrapped a cloth around the fresh bread loaves and placed them carefully in a woven basket. Her daughters hurried at her heels, giggling, tugging at her shawl. "Mama, can we come to the market?" the younger one asked, eyes bright. Livia brushed a curl from her daughter's forehead. "You may come, but only if you stay close." The older daughter held her sister's hand proudly, already feeling responsible for guiding her through Rome's busy paths. Aurelia joined them at the doorway, with her repaired loom strapped across her back. "I want to buy colored thread," she said with a spark in her eyes. Flavia appeared next, carrying a small purse of coins, perhaps for herbs, perhaps for wool, perhaps for nothing more than the comfort of company. Marcia came last, leaning on her cane, her old bones wrapped in a thick shawl. "I am slow, but I am present," she declared, shutting her gate behind her. Together, they stepped into the street. 5 women and 2 children. A small procession, moving with the slow rhythm of everyday Rome. The market was already waking. Vendors lifted wooden shutters. Olive sellers arranged their jars. Weavers hung brightly dyed wool in rows like small painted flags. Fishermen shouted prices near the fountain. A spice merchant tapped clay bowls filled with cumin, coriander, saffron, little suns of powdered color. The air shimmered with scents. Fresh bread, crushed olives, figs, charcoal smoke, and the faint sweetness of honeyed pastries. Livia inhaled deeply. This was the Rome she loved most. Not the Senate, not the parades, not the marble arches. But these raw, human moments. Her daughters tugged her forward. "Look, grapes, Mama, can we?" Livia smiled, handing each child a single coin. "Choose wisely," she warned. The older girl nodded with great seriousness, dragging her sister toward a fruit stand. Aurelia wandered toward a wool vendor, fingers gliding dreamily over soft threads dyed in rose, saffron, and deep indigo. "This one," she whispered to herself, touching a strand as if touching possibility. Flavia paused at a pottery stall. Rows of clay lamps, bowls, and pitchers lined the table. She touched a lamp with a curved handle, her eyes softening. "My husband bought one like this when we were newly married." Her voice did not tremble, but her heart did. Marcia stood beside her. "Memories rise when you least expect them," she said. Flavia exhaled slowly. "I am learning to let them come without breaking." "That," Marcia said, "is strength." As the women moved together again, they passed a young mother rocking a crying baby. Livia knelt beside her instinctively. "Do you need water, food?" The woman shook her head. "He's hungry. My husband hasn't returned with coins." Livia opened her bread cloth without thinking. "Take this loaf, feed him." The woman's eyes filled. "I cannot repay." "You don't need to," Livia said softly. Flavia handed the woman a small cheese round. Aurelia offered a fig. Even Marcia added a tiny handful of herbs to help him sleep, she said. The baby stopped crying. The mother's shoulders relaxed. Peace, small and immediate, spread like warm oil. They walked on. The market grew louder now, but the women moved through it like a slow heartbeat, steady, patient, intentional. A vendor selling clay beads waved the girls over. "Choose one each," he said, smiling, "for good luck." The younger daughter ran to Livia. "Mama, I want the blue one." Then choose it." The older girl held a small red bead. "This one is for you," she told her mother. Livia's breath caught. "For me." "You wake before everyone, you work the most, you deserve something pretty." Livia knelt, pulling her daughter into her arms. "Thank you, my love." Aurelia approached, holding a bundle of threads. "I bought 3 colors. I will weave something beautiful this time." "You always do," Livia said warmly. They continued deeper into the market, until the noise softened behind them. A small corner cafe sat in the shade of a carved marble column. An old man served watered wine and warm milk. "Sit," Flavia suggested. "Let's rest." They sat together at a stone table, shaded by ivy vines. The children sipped warm milk. Aurelia unraveled threads. Marcia massaged her knees. Flavia watched the crowd with thoughtful eyes. Livia simply breathed. Women of Rome rarely rested. But in sleep stories, in quiet moments like this, they deserved to. A man passed by selling fresh dates. Another carried bundles of lavender. 3 boys chased each other around a water fountain. A street performer played a soft tune on a reed flute. It was all so ordinary. And all so beautiful. Aurelia leaned closer to Livia. "Do you ever think," she whispered, "that our lives matter, even if no one writes about us?" Livia looked at her, really looked, and answered, "Our lives matter because we live them. Not because someone remembers them." The words settled into everyone's heart, warm and true. A breeze lifted the linen canopy above them. Shadows danced over their faces. And for a moment, time slowed. As if Rome itself paused to acknowledge these quiet women who shaped the city in ways history would never fully tell. They finished their drinks, gathered their baskets, and began their walk home. The market behind them buzzed with growing noise. But the women carried a pocket of calm back with them. A small, gentle Rome that lived only in their footsteps. And as they walked, Livia felt something she rarely allowed herself to feel. A hope. Simple, steady, soft hope. The kind that grows in courtyards, in kitchens, in markets. In the everyday lives of women who hold the world together. Without ever being seen. The afternoon in Rome passed slowly, like honey sliding down warm clay. By the time the sun began its descent, the sky shifted into shades of deep amber, soft peach, and muted red colors that seemed mixed by the hands of ancient gods themselves. Livia finished folding the laundry in the courtyard as the day cooled. Her daughters were inside, napping in a soft heap of blankets after the long walk through the market. Their tiny breaths drifted through the open doorway like a second breeze, warm and delicate. Oralia leaned against the stone wall, running her fingers over the dyed threads she bought earlier. Each strand glowed faintly in the fading light, a promise of new beginnings. Flavia sat quietly beside the herb pots, a clay lamp near her knee, her face reflecting its flickering glow. Marcia, slow but steady, arranged rosemary sprigs on a flat board so they could dry evenly overnight. When the heat softened, Livia finally said, "Shall we go to the river?" Oralia lit up immediately. Flavia nodded. Marcia tapped her cane against the floor. "I walk slowly," she warned, "but I walk." Livia carefully lifted her daughters from their nap. The older one rubbed her eyes. The younger reached for her mother's shawl without fully waking. The women stepped into the street again, this time moving toward the Tiber, the ancient river that breathed through Rome like a steady heartbeat. The road leading there was quieter now. Shops were closing. Food vendors were sweeping their stalls. The smell of roasted chestnuts mixed with the evening air. As they walked, Livia whispered to her girls, "When I was young, the river was the safest place I knew." "Why?" the older girl asked. "Because water remembers everything," Livia replied. "And forgets nothing. It carries every story to the sea." Oralia smiled. "Then today it will carry ours too." By the time they reached the riverbank, the sky had deepened to a softer gold. The Tiber flowed calmly, its surface shimmering like a long piece of silk dancing beneath the breeze. A group of old men played dice near the steps. A young woman washed linen at the water's edge, humming a folk tune. A fisherman pulled up his nets slowly, whispering a prayer for tomorrow's catch. Life here was quieter, as if the river taught everyone to speak softly. Livia spread a wool shawl across the grass, and the women sat. The children wandered toward the water's edge, picking smooth stones and tossing them in. Each small splash echoed like a tiny heartbeat. Oralia leaned back, letting her hair fall loosely over her shoulders. "I could stay here forever." Flavia hugged her knees to her chest. "I used to come here with my husband. He loved evenings by the river." "And you?" Livia asked gently. "I love the quiet," Flavia answered. "The kind that hurts and heals at the same time." Marcia exhaled deeply as she lowered herself onto the shawl. "My husband hated rivers," she said with a soft laugh, "said they reminded him of taxes." All of them burst into gentle laughter. The river glowed under the darkening sky. Children ran along the bank. 2 dogs barked playfully. An elderly couple shared figs under a mulberry tree. Rome, for a moment, felt small. Small enough to fit in a single breath. Aurelia dipped her fingers into the water. It's warm. Everything is warm after a long day, Livia said, watching her daughters run. A moment later, the younger girl tripped, scraping her knee on the stone. She cried out, the sharp sound cutting through the gentle evening. Livia rushed over immediately, lifting her into her arms. "SHH, it's all right, little dove. Let me see." The wound was small, but tears fell freely. Aurelia brought a handful of river water. Flavia tore a strip from the edge of her shawl. Marcia crushed a herb leaf to calm the sting. Together, they cleaned and wrapped the knee. The crying softened. The child clung to Livia's neck. "It hurts." Livia kissed her hair. "I know, but you're safe, and tomorrow it will hurt less." Flavia whispered. "That's true for almost everything." They stayed by the river as the sun dipped below the rooftops. Shadows stretched long. The lamps along the far bridge flickered to life one by one, like tiny stars choosing to shine early. Aurelia lay back on the shawl, staring up at the darkening sky. "Sometimes I think Rome is too big for people like us, too loud, too demanding." Livia sat beside her. "And sometimes I think people like us keep Rome from falling apart." Aurelia turned her head. "You really believe that?" "Of course," Livia said simply. "Men build walls, women build lives." Marcia nodded in agreement. "We carry Rome in our arms, in our kitchens, in our hearts. That is how cities survive." Flavia whispered. "And how families do." The women watched the river together. Its slow, steady movement mirroring their own lives. Quiet, consistent, gentle, unstoppable. As night finally settled over Rome, the children lay sleepily against Livia's lap. The lamps along the river glowed brighter. A soft breeze curled through the grass. Livia closed her eyes for a moment. She didn't think about the laundry waiting. She didn't think about tomorrow's chores. She didn't even think about the empire beyond her street. She thought only of this. The women beside her. The river carrying their stories. The children breathing safely. And the quiet Rome that belonged to them alone. Night settled over Rome gently, as if laying a warm blanket across the vast city. The glow of daylight faded from the rooftops, replaced by the flickering dance of oil lamps, each one keeping a small circle of darkness at bay. The streets softened, voices mellowed, footsteps slowed. Livia carried her daughters home from the Tiber River, one asleep on her shoulder, the other yawning wide enough to swallow the whole sky. Aurelia walked beside her, weaving colored thread through her fingers, as if practicing a pattern only she knew. Flavia carried the empty food cloth and the last remaining fig. Marcia walked with her cane, tapping softly in rhythm with the night. By the time they reached the house, the sky was a deep blue, sprinkled with early stars. Inside, Livia lit a small oil lamp. Its flame shivered gently, casting soft shadows across the mosaic floor. The home felt smaller at night, warmer, more intimate, like the world had folded itself inward to let families rest. Her daughters settled onto their straw mats. The younger child whispered, "Mama, tell a story." Livia brushed a hand across her cheek. "A small one, Your eyes are already half asleep." She sat beside them, Orlia and Flavia listening nearby. Marcia rested against the wall, closing her eyes but listening intently, as old stories tugged old memories. Livia began softly. Once, long before Rome had walls or roads or emperors, there lived a young girl named Tullia. She was the daughter of a shepherd, quiet like the dawn, brave like the night. Every morning, she carried a basket of bread up the hill so her father would not be hungry while guarding the sheepy. Her voice flowed like warm water. The girl's eyelids grew heavy. Aurelia leaned forward, chin on her palm. Flavia let her shoulders relax for the first time all day. Marcia's cane slipped slightly as she drifted in and out of memory. Olivia continued. One day, Tullia saw a wolf watching the flock, but the wolf was not hungry, only lonely. So she placed a piece of warm bread on a stone and whispered, "Eat." And the wolf did, and never hurt the sheep again. The younger daughter murmured. The wolf was kind. Many things are kind, Livia whispered, when you feed them instead of fear them. The children fell asleep before the last line of the story. Livia pulled blankets over them gently. Aurelia closed her eyes, imagining Tullia feeding wolves with crumbs of courage. Flavia wiped a tear she didn't expect. Marcia let the story wash over her like warm rain. When the room grew quiet, Aurelia whispered, "Livia, who told you that story?" "My mother," Livia said softly. "And her mother before her." Flavia looked around the room, the glowing lamp illuminating every corner. "No one writes your stories in Rome," she whispered. "But they carry more truth than anything in the libraries." Livia smiled faintly. "Stories are for hearts, not scrolls." Outside, the sounds of Rome softened further. The clatter of carts faded. The laughter of taverns dimmed. Even the dogs curled up beside warm thresholds. The women sat together in the glow of the lamp. No market noise. No chores left to finish. No one needing anything. Just silence. Just warmth. Just Rome as it felt in its gentlest form. Aurelia broke the quiet. "Livia, do you ever miss the life you had before children?" Livia thought for a moment, not avoiding, not rushing. "I don't miss before," she said softly. "I miss having someone to share the after with." Aurelia touched her arm. "You have us." Livia nodded. "I do, and I am grateful." Flavia stared at the flame, voice trembling just slightly. "I miss sitting beside someone who waited for me at the end of the day." Marcia opened her eyes. "Loneliness," she said, "is not the absence of people. It is the absence of someone who sees you." The words settled into the room like dust on old stone. Aurelia whispered, "Do you think we will always be alone like this?" Marcia shook her head. "No one is always anything. Lives change like seasons. But remember, you belong to yourselves first." Livia placed her hand over Aurelia's. "Rome is big, your story is long, you will find your place." The oil lamp flickered. The night deepened. Their breaths fell into a gentle rhythm. Livia stood and walked quietly to the doorway, gazing out at the star-studded sky. Rome glowed under torchlight. Temples, rooftops, alleyways, wooden doors, clay pots. Each illuminated faintly, as though the city itself was whispering a lullaby. Flavia came to stand beside her. "You carry the night well," she said. Livia smiled. No, the night carries me. Behind them, Marcia softly hummed an old folk tune. Orlia began weaving a fresh pattern under the lamp. The children slept with cheeks pressed against soft linen. It was an ordinary night. Nothing grand. Nothing historic. And yet, these quiet nights were the foundation of Rome itself, a civilization held together, not by armies, but by women who lived, loved, and endured in the warm glow of oil lamps and whispered stories. The next morning arrived with a softness that wrapped itself around the city like a woolen shawl. Rome stirred awake slowly, its ancient walls glowing warm under the rising sun. But inside Livia's small domus, the day began even earlier, with the low crackle of rekindled embers and the comforting hum of women preparing for the hours ahead. Orlia was the first to rise. She sat up on her mat, stretching her arms, feeling the stiffness in her fingers from weaving late into the night. The threads she had chosen, indigo, saffron, and rose, lay beside her like small rivers of color. She picked them up and smiled. Today, she would weave something new. Livia was already awake, quietly grinding grains in a stone mortar, her movements steady and rhythmic. Flavia sat near the doorway, mending a torn cloak. Marcia eased herself into a sitting position, rubbing her knees, whispering morning prayers only she understood. Livia's daughter stirred slowly, blinking in the dim light of dawn. "Mama, is the bread ready?" The younger one rubbed her eyes, still half asleep. Livia chuckled softly. "Hungry already, come help me finish it." As the children joined their mother, the others prepared for the day's work. Rome had no shortage of chores, no shortage of quiet battles women fought without swords or shields. But today held a different energy. The moment they stepped outside, the women sensed it, a subtle tension in the air. Merchants whispered among themselves. A group of soldiers marched, past more quickly than usual. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones, glancing toward the northern wall of the city. Orlia frowned. "Something is happening." Flavia tightened her grip on the cloak she was mending. "I heard men talking last night, something about trouble beyond the gates." Marcia nodded slowly. "There's always trouble beyond the gates. The question is how close it is." Livia's daughters clung to her hands, sensing the unease even without understanding the words. But Livia stood calmly. "Whatever it is, Rome will handle it. We always do." They walked toward the well to fill their clay jugs. Women from other homes gathered there too, some whispering anxiously, others pretending everything was normal, though their eyes betrayed their worry. Lucia greeted them with a strained smile. "You heard the news." "No," Livia answered. "Tell us." Lucia lowered her voice. "Raiders attacked a caravan near the northern road. The guards say they may come closer." Orlia inhaled sharply. Flavia looked toward the distant hills. Marcia gripped her cane tightly. Livia remained steady. "We are inside the walls, and Rome's walls have stood for centuries." Lucia nodded, though her hands trembled. "I know, but when men speak of danger, women feel it first." They filled their jugs and walked back slowly. Once home, Livia gathered the women. "Worry will not protect us," she said calmly. "Work will keep our minds steady, and staying together will keep us safe." Her voice grounded everyone. Orlia resumed her weaving. Flavia returned to mending cloaks. Marcia prepared protective herbs, laying them out in neat bundles. Livia tended to the children, then stepped outside to check on her neighbors. She helped one woman lift a heavy basket, walked another back from the well, and reassured a frightened young mother whose husband had gone to the city gates. By midday, the tension had not lifted. But the women had formed a quiet circle of strength within their little neighborhood. As the sun warmed the city, a messenger passed through the street shouting news. The northern threat is under control. The gates are secure. Children cheered. Vendors reopened shops. A wave of relief washed over the streets. Orla exhaled deeply. I thought something terrible would happen. Flavia shook her head. Something terrible always threatens to happen. Rome is too large for peace to be loud. Marcia added, peace is quiet, so quiet that most men don't notice when women keep it alive. That afternoon, the neighbors gathered in Livia's courtyard. Not because they had to, but because fear, relief, and gratitude all needed a place to land. Women brought small offerings. A bowl of lentils. A jar of olives. A loaf of bread. A handful of dried apricots. They sat together, sharing food and stories. One woman spoke of how she had stayed awake all night praying. Another confessed she had hidden her children under the table. A newlywed girl admitted she had cried into her cloak until dawn. Livia looked around the circle. You did what women do, she said softly. You protected your homes with your fear, and your hearts with your hope. Orla added, men guarded the gates, but women guarded the families. The courtyard hummed with quiet agreement. Flavia stood and tied her finished cloak around a young mother's shoulders. You need this more than I do, she said. The young woman's eyes filled with tears. Orla offered woven thread bracelets to Livia's daughters. Marcia distributed herbs for courage, though everyone knew they were just simple rosemary leaves. As the afternoon waned, the women stayed close. Not because danger lingered, but because the day had reminded them of something essential. They were the ones who held the walls from within. When Rome felt vulnerable, it was their arms that held the children, their lanterns that lit the night, their whispers that steadied trembling hearts. History never taught this, but they lived it every day. As dusk approached, Livia looked at the women gathered around her, friends who felt like sisters, neighbors who felt like family, and she felt an ache of gratitude swell inside her. Not for safety, not for peace, but for togetherness. For the simple truth that Rome's strength was built not only from stone, but from women who rose every morning, faced every fear, and held every wall with their quiet courage. Night returned to Rome with a softness that washed away the fears of the day. The earlier whispers of danger faded into gentle conversations, into shared bread, into children's laughter returning to the courtyards and alleys. Rome survived another worry, because it always did. But for the women, the night felt heavier than before. Not with fear, but with the deep exhaustion that follows bravery. Livia stepped into her courtyard and looked up. The moon hovered above the rooftops like a pale shield, round and steady, glowing faintly through a drifting veil of clouds. Her daughters slept inside, curled together under wool blankets, their small bodies rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Their sleep was the kind that trusted the world would hold still until morning. Aurelia sat beside the herb pots, twining her new threads around a wooden spindle. Flavia rested on the stone steps, hands folded in her lap, face illuminated by moonlight. Marcia hovered near the doorway, as if guarding everyone with her silent presence. Livia said softly, "It's been a long day." Flavia nodded. "I feel like I've lived 3 days in one." Marcia gave a knowing hum. Fear ages the bones, relief rests them. Aurelia looked toward the sky. "I didn't realize how afraid I was until it was over." Livia sat beside her. "We always realize the weight afterward." The courtyard felt different tonight. Calmer. Fuller. Like the women themselves, had stitched a protective circle into the air around them. Flavia suddenly asked, "Livia, what were you like before children, before all this?" Livia smiled faintly. "I used to read more, sing more, sleep more." She laughed softly. "I thought everything in life was supposed to happen quickly. Now I know everything happens slowly, beautifully, painfully, exactly when it needs to." Aurelia rested her head on her knees. "I look at you, all of you, and I wonder what kind of woman I will become." Marcia tapped her cane lightly. "You will become the kind you choose." Aurelia's voice trembled. "And if I choose wrong?" "You choose again," Marcia said simply. The moon climbed higher, glowing brighter over the Roman rooftops. Suddenly, a faint sound drifted across the walls. A lullaby. Soft. Ancient. Carried by a woman's voice, somewhere in the houses beyond. The melody wrapped around the courtyard like silk. Aurelia whispered, "Who sings at this hour?" Livia recognized the tune immediately. "It's an old cradle song. My mother used to hum it when the nights were cold." Flavia closed her eyes. "My mother sang it too." The song felt like a thread, tying all their mothers together across time. The voice grew clearer as the breeze shifted. "Sleep, little star of mine. The night is wide and kind. Rest your head, rest your breath. Until dawn breaks the sky." Aurelia exhaled shakily. "It feels like the whole city is singing to itself." Livia looked at the moonlit rooftops. "In Rome, every mother sings. Even the ones who have lost. Even the ones who fear. Even the ones who hope quietly in the dark." A silence settled among them. Not empty silence, but full silence. The kind that holds meaning between breaths. Flavia's voice broke gently through it. "Sometimes I wonder if the gods hear us. If they see the women who hold this city together." Livia touched her hand. "The gods might not, but our children do." Marcia added, "And our stories do, even if no one writes them." Aurelia watched Livia's daughters sleeping inside. "They will grow up and say, 'My mother kept the house standing when Rome shook.' They will remember you." Livia shook her head softly. "They will remember love, not me." Flavia whispered, "That is still you." The moonlight brightened, turning the courtyard floor pale and silver. The herb pots cast soft shadows. The laundry, left to dry, now swayed like ghostly sails in the cool breeze. Aurelia broke the quiet. "Tell us something, Livia, something true, something you've never said aloud." Livia hesitated, then breathed deeply. "When I became a mother, I thought I had to be perfect." She laughed faintly. I learned quickly that perfection is a myth. But presence is powerful. Flavia nodded, with emotion tightening her throat. That is true for all of us. Marcia leaned forward. Then I will say something I have never said. I am tired, so tired. But being with you all makes the tiredness feel worth carrying. Aurelia wiped a small tear. And I will say that I am afraid of the future. But less afraid when I'm here. Flavia's voice softened. I miss being someone's wife. She paused. But I am proud of the woman I became after losing him. Livia rested her hand over hers. You became strong. And gentle, Aurelia added. And wise, Marcia finished. Flavia's eyes glistened. The moon drifted higher. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then grew quiet again. A cartwheel creaked. The lullaby faded into the night. Livia inhaled the cool Rome air. This city sleeps because women stay awake. We worry, we watch, we soothe, we stitch, we prepare, we hope. Aurelia looked around the circle. And we carry each other. Livia smiled at her. That is what mothers do. Even when they are not related. Flavia whispered. Tonight Rome feels safe. Not because the walls held, but because we did. Marcia placed a hand over her heart. And will again tomorrow. The moon cast its quiet blessing over them. Warm. A steady. Ancient. And the women sat together long into the night. Mothers, daughters, widows, healers, dreamers. Guardians of a city that never knew how much it depended on them. They stayed until their breaths matched the rhythm of the sleeping streets. Until their hearts loosened. Until the night wrapped them in peace. Rome rested. Because its women finally did. The next morning rose differently over Rome. Not in the usual pale blue, but in a soft saffron glow. That bathed every rooftop, every alley, every sleeping doorway. In golden warmth. A breeze carrying the scent of crushed mint and warm dust drifted through the city, waking it gently. It felt like a special day. One of those rare mornings when the world seemed to whisper, live slowly, breathe deeply, feel everything. Livia woke to that golden light spilling through her doorway. Her daughters were already stirring, their hair kissed by sunlight. Mama, the younger one whispered. The sky looks like honey. Livia smiled. Yes, honey for the heart. Aurelia stretched her arms, letting the sun warm her face. I feel as if today is meant for something new. Flavia tied her shawl neatly and nodded. Some days arrive with purpose before we even know what it is. Marcia was slowest to rise, but when she finally sat up, the saffron light softened her wrinkles, making her look younger for a breath. It's a good morning, she said simply. Rome rarely gives those. The women prepared for the day. Livia washed the children's faces, combed their hair, tied their loose tunics. Aurelia brushed her dyed threads, holding them up to the sun to see their true color. Flavia mended a small basket that had begun to unravel. Marcia crushed herbs, whispering something that sounded like thanks rather than prayer. As they stepped outside, the street glowed under the saffron sky. Vendors opened their stalls more slowly, savoring the morning. Children played hopstones, their laughter bright and airy. Two women swept their steps while humming an old folk tune. A young man carried flowers to someone he loved. Rome, on rare mornings like this, felt lighter, as if the entire city believed in gentle miracles. Aurelia breathed in. It feels calm. It feels hopeful, Flavia added. Olivia nodded. It feels like a day where nothing bad will come. They walked to the small square near the baker's shop. The warm smell of fresh bread blended with sweet figs and earthy olives. A baker's apprentice stood outside, waving at the neighborhood children. Come, little ones, a treat for the morning. Livia's daughters ran forward. The apprentice handed each child a tiny honey roll, still warm, still steaming. For free, Aurelia asked. The apprentice grinned. The baker said today the sun is generous, so we must be too. Flavia's eyes softened. People forget how kindness can begin a day. Lucia approached carrying her son, his leg wrapped from the earlier injury but healing well. He insisted on walking, Lucia laughed. But I carried him halfway. Livia knelt and touched the bandage. It looks much better today. Marcia nodded approvingly. Children heal fast, their hearts help their bones. Aurelia whispered. I wish adults healed that fast. Flavia answered. They do, just not on the outside. As they moved toward the fountain, the crisp splash of water echoed in the square. The saffron sky above turned brighter, painting the marble rim in gold. A group of older women sat on the stone bench, preparing vegetables, peeling cucumbers, slicing herbs, sorting lentils. They greeted Livia and her friends with nods and smiles. One of the elder women, Camilla, spoke first. Come sit, the sky is too beautiful to ignore. The women joined them, forming a loose circle. Children played nearby. Birds fluttered across the rooftops. The city felt soft, like a quilt woven from sunlight and breath. Camilla pointed to Aurelia's threads. What will you make with those? A shawl, Aurelia said, eyes bright. For I don't know who yet, someone who needs warmth. Camilla smiled knowingly. All gifts find their owners. Flavia handed Camilla a piece of mended cloth. You taught me this stitch. And you improved it, Camilla said proudly. Livia watched the older women quietly, noticing their hands. Wrinkled, scarred, gentle. Hands that had raised families, tended wounds, buried sorrow, carried Rome through both quiet and storm. These women are the true walls of Rome, Livia thought. Not stone. Not soldiers. But women. As they worked and talked, a soft breeze lifted fallen leaves. One leaf drifted onto Flavia's lap. Golden. Perfect. A sign of autumn's early arrival. Flavia held it gently. My husband loved this season, she said softly. He said the world looks honest in gold. Aurelia leaned close. Maybe he's thinking of you today. Flavia blinked back tears. A maybe. The square soon filled with more mothers, daughters, and neighbors. Someone began humming a song. Someone else joined. Then another. A simple melody. Soft. Ancient. Made of love, work, and memory. The children danced around the fountain. The women peeled vegetables in rhythm. Aurelia's spindle spun golden thread. Marcia whispered blessings into tiny herb bundles. Flavia's eyes softened with peace she hadn't felt in months. And Livia's. She watched the saffron sky glow above her daughters, her friends, her city. In that moment, she understood something she had always felt but never named. Rome was not built in marble. Rome was built in mornings like this. Mornings full of quiet hope. Women's hands. Children's laughter. And sunlight turning every ordinary life into gold. The saffron morning slowly mellowed into a soft afternoon, and as the day grew warmer, Rome settled beneath a gentle hush. The marketplace quieted, the children retreated to shaded steps, and even the pigeons moved slower, as if the entire city had decided to rest together. Livia returned home with her daughters, their hands sticky from honey rolls, their laughter drifting in soft waves. Aurelia carried her thread basket like a treasure chest. Flavia walked beside them, humming the lullaby from the night before. Marcia followed last, stopping every so often to greet neighbors or touch a passing child's cheek. Once they reached the courtyard, Livia filled a clay jug with water and poured some into a bowl for her daughters to wash. The sunlight slipped through the vines overhead, and the shadows danced lightly over the mosaic tiles. Aurelia set her bundle of threads on the stone ledge and said, "I want to work outside today. The light is too perfect to waste." Flavia nodded. "I'll join you. It feels like a day meant for making something." Marcia tapped her cane as she walked toward a shaded corner. "I'll rest in the garden. My bones are tired, but my ears are open." Livia smiled. "Then today we stay close to home." They stepped into the small garden behind the house, a quiet place tucked between two walls. It was not grand, just a patch of herbs, a fig tree, a lemon plant in a cracked clay pot, and a small bench that had survived more winters than Marcia could remember. But it was peaceful. And in Rome, peace was its own kind of miracle. Aurelia sat on the bench and began weaving her colored threads into a wide band. Flavia knelt beside the herb patch, trimming mint leaves with gentle hands. Livia's daughters collected fallen fig leaves, arranging them in shapes only children understood. Marcia settled under the lemon plant's shade. "The garden looks alive today," she murmured. Livia knelt near the soil, planting a new sprig of rosemary. Everything grows better in calm days. Aurelia's hands moved gracefully as she wove. "What are you making?" Flavia asked. "A sash," Aurelia replied. "For someone who needs strength." Marcia chuckled. "That could be any of us." Livia smiled. "All of us." As the hours passed, the garden filled with soft sounds. The snip of herbs. The swish of thread. Children's murmured play. And birds hopping between branches. Aurelia's sash grew longer, the colors blending beautifully. Flavia collected herbs into a small basket, arranging them by scent, mint, sage, rosemary, thyme. Marcia traced old symbols in the dirt with her cane, lost in memories she rarely spoke of. After a while, Flavia broke the silence. "Do you know what this garden reminds me of?" "What?" Aurelia asked. "My mother's courtyard," Flavia said softly. It smelled like rosemary and figs, and she always said gardens keep secrets better than people. Livia looked up. What secrets did hers keep? Flavia's eyes wandered the garden, as if searching for threads of memory. She hid my father's letters there, the ones he wrote from the army, the ones that said he missed her, that he dreamed of coming home. She paused. He never did come home, but she kept those letters under the fig tree until the day she died. Aurelia placed a hand over Flavia's. That's beautiful and sad. Marcia spoke from the shade. That is how life feels when you live long enough, beautiful and sad at the same time. Livia brushed soil from her hands. I used to hide things too, when I first came to this house. She glanced toward the fig tree. I buried a small clay figure there, a gift from my mother. I didn't want my husband to throw it away. Aurelia gasped softly. You still have it. Livia nodded. It's still under this soil. I never dug it up. Flavia smiled. So this garden holds your secret too. Livia's daughters looked up, hearing the word secret. What is buried? The younger one asked. Stories, Livia answered gently. Stories we don't speak of, but that still belong to us. The girls seemed satisfied with that mystery. A soft breeze rustled the fig tree leaves. Somewhere nearby, a neighbor's wind chime made a gentle, tinkling sound. Aurelia leaned back against the bench. Do you ever feel like the city never sees us? Like our days pass quietly, unnoticed. Flavia rubbed mint between her fingers, releasing its scent. Rome sees the loud, but we are the quiet. Marcia replied. And the quiet is what keeps the loud from falling apart. Livia looked around at the women. The weaver, the healer, the widow, the elder, the children playing by the roots of a tree. This garden, Livia said softly, is proof that quiet things matter. Aurelia whispered, You think the gods see us? Livia paused, then smiled faintly. Maybe the gods see the city, but the earth sees us. She touched the soil. And the soil remembers. Marcia closed her eyes. That is why gardens are sacred. They listen, they hold, they heal. Flavia added, And they forgive. Aurelia lowered her voice. I think I'll bury something too, something from today. So the earth remembers us long after we're gone. Livia asked, What will you bury? Aurelia held up a small thread of indigo. This, the first thread of the sash. So the garden knows who began it. Marcia chuckled. Then Rome will remember you as a weaver of peace. Aurelia blushed. Flavia placed a sprig of mint beside her. I'll bury this with it, for clarity. Livia smiled and added a rosemary leaf. For strength. Marcia placed her hand over the 3 little offerings. And I will add a blessing. The children giggled and placed fig leaves on top. For beauty, they announced. The women laughed softly. Aurelia dug a tiny hollow in the soil near the fig tree, placed the items inside, and covered them gently. There, she whispered. Now this moment lives forever. The garden breathed around them. Full of secrets, full of tenderness, full of the quiet resilience of women whose lives were rarely written but always felt. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the walls in shades of gold and rose, Livia realized something. This garden was more than a place. It was a memory keeper. A sanctuary. A second heart for the women who had nowhere else to rest their truths. And today, it held a new story. One woven in thread, herbs, laughter, and the whispers of women who carried Rome in silence. By the next morning, the saffron sky had faded into a soft pale blue, cool and gentle as freshly washed linen. Rome felt quieter than usual. Even the pigeons on the rooftops cooed more softly, as if they too sensed the calm beating through the city's ancient stones. Livia stepped outside with a clay jug, the children trailing behind her with sleepy eyes. Aurelia stretched her arms high, loosening her stiff, weaving muscles. Flavia carried a basket of herbs from yesterday's harvest. Marcia leaned carefully on her cane, but her face looked rested. The calm of the last 2 days had softened her bones. Livia said, "Let's take a walk today, the small road outside the city walls." Aurelia raised an eyebrow. "Outside the walls, isn't that unsafe?" Livia shook her head gently. "Not far, just to the old olive road. My mother used to take me there when I was little. She said the road remembers footsteps." Flavia smiled softly. "All roads remember women who walked with purpose." Marcia chuckled. "And children who ran too fast." The girls perked up. "Can we run?" "No," all 4 women said at once. The girls pouted, then laughed. They gathered their things and walked through the narrow alleys. The sunlight filtering through laundry lines drew stripes across the cobblestones. A few neighbors waved from windows. A baker's boy lifted a loaf in greeting. A potter shook clay from his hands and bowed slightly. Rome was waking slowly. But the women walked with unhurried steps, letting the morning breathe around them. When they reached the small northern gate, a guard recognized Livia from the market. "Going far?" he asked. "Just to the olive road," Livia replied. He nodded. "Quiet morning, stay together." They stepped outside the gate, and suddenly the world opened. No crowds. No stone walls pressing close. Only a long dirt path lined with wildflowers, olive trees, and far-off hills rising like gentle giants against the sky. Aurelia inhaled deeply. "It smells different here." "It smells free," Flavia whispered. The children ran a few steps ahead. Not too fast, but with small bursts of joy. They picked wildflowers, compared petals, laughed at butterflies. Marcia tapped her cane lightly on the dirt. "I've missed this sound. Stone streets are too loud." They walked until they reached a tree with twisted branches. An ancient olive tree, older than any of them, older than Rome's walls, older perhaps than memory itself. Livia touched its bark lovingly. "This tree was here when I was a girl." Aurelia placed her palm over the bark. "It feels alive." "It is," Marcia murmured. "Old things survive by listening." Flavia looked down the long road stretching ahead. "Your mother walked here often." Livia nodded. "She told me stories here, stories her mother told her, stories of women who came before us." Aurelia sat under the tree. "Tell one." Livia took a long breath. A breath filled with sunlight, dust, and memory. "When I was 7, my mother told me about the road of voices. She said if you walk far enough, you can hear whispers in the wind. The whispers of women who lived before us, breathing courage into those who followed." Marcia closed her eyes. "I've heard winds like that." Flavia leaned her head against the trunk. "Do you think the road hears us today?" Livia nodded. "Of course it does. It hears everything." The children ran back with fistfuls of flowers. "Mama, look for you." Livia smiled and kissed their heads. "Thank you, little stars." Aurelia noticed the petals. "They match your sash threads." The girls giggled proudly. They all sat beneath the olive tree. The shade cool. The air sweet. the world wide and peaceful. Flavia removed her sandals and stretched her toes into the warm dirt. I forgot how good the earth feels. Aurelia joined her, laughing as the soil warmed her feet. It feels like the earth is remembering us. Marcia whispered. It is. Livia looked down the road. When I walked here as a girl, my mother held my hand. I felt safe. Flavia's voice softened. You still make everyone around you feel safe. Livia blinked in surprise. I do. Aurelia nodded firmly. You guide us the way your mother guided you. Marcia added. Rome needs women like you more than it needs soldiers. Livia looked away shyly, brushing dust from her skirt. Maybe, maybe not. Flavia rested a hand on her shoulder. It does. Silence settled again. A deep, grounding silence. The kind that fills the heart without saying anything. After a while, Aurelia spoke softly. What would your mother say if she saw you now? Livia smiled, small, tender, aching. She would say, You are doing well. You stand strong. You hold your daughters gently. And you walk the old roads, so they learn where they come from. Flavia exhaled. My mother would say, You have survived more than you think. Marcia murmured. My mother would say, Every wrinkle is a line of poetry. Aurelia whispered, I wish I had known mine longer. Livia touched her hand. You know her through yourself. Aurelia swallowed hard. Maybe. The breeze shifted, brushing through the olive branches. A soft rustling sound swept down the road, carrying a faint whisper. Or maybe it was only the leaves. But it felt like a blessing. Soft. Ancient. A steady. Livia stood, lifting her daughters into her arms. It's time to go back. Aurelia brushed dirt from her dress. Do we take the same road back? Flavia smiled gently. We always do. Marcia tapped her cane. Old roads lead home. They walked slowly, hand in hand, back toward Rome, carrying sunlight in their hair, warm earth under their feet, and the quiet strength of women who remembered where they came from. By the time the women returned through the city gates, the afternoon sun had faded into a gentle bronze. Rome glowed in that warm light, rooftops softening, shadows stretching, the streets carrying the hush of a city settling into evening. Livia's daughters skipped ahead, still clutching their tiny wildflower bouquets. Aurelia hummed quietly as she walked, the melody caught from the breeze along the olive road. Flavia carried sprigs of mint from the garden, letting the scent calm her heartbeat. Marcia's cane tapped rhythmically on the worn stones, but her steps seemed lighter today. The city welcomed them home with familiar comfort. When they reached Livia's house, she set water to boil, grinding grain with slow, practiced movements. Aurelia arranged her woven sash on the table, long now, rich in color, alive with meaning. Flavia washed the herbs gently, dropping a few into the simmering pot. Marcia rubbed oil onto her knees, humming an old prayer as she did. It felt like an ordinary evening. But underneath it, something had shifted. A quiet strength had woven itself among them, like invisible thread binding their days. After supper, as the sky deepened into soft purple and the first stars appeared, the women gathered in the courtyard. The air was warm, with hints of fig leaves and distant cooking fires drifting across the rooftops. Livia's daughters curled near her legs, half drowsy from the day's excitement. Oralia stretched her woven sash between her hands, admiring the intricate way the colors blended: saffron for warmth, indigo for strength, rose for love. Flavia lit an oil lamp and placed it in the center of the courtyard. Marcia sat beside the herb pots, leaning back with a tired but peaceful sigh. The flame flickered softly, casting a golden glow across their faces. Oralia whispered, "We should tell one last story tonight." Livia nodded. "Yes, a story that ends our day the way it began, gently." Flavia looked at the sash. "That thread deserves a story woven with it." Marcia chuckled. "Then speak, Livia. You carry the oldest voice among us." Livia laughed softly. "I'm not that old." "Older than the girls," Marcia said. "Old enough for wisdom." The children giggled. Livia looked up at the sky. The stars faint but steady. And began. Long ago, before Rome was a kingdom, before the walls were raised, before there were emperors or soldiers or markets, there were only women. Oralia leaned forward. "Just women." "Yes," Livia whispered. "Women who cooked for hunters. Women who healed wounds with herbs. Women who told stories so the dark would not feel so long. Women who slept with children in their arms. Women who kept fire alive through winter nights." Flavia's eyes softened. "It sounds familiar." "It should," Livia said gently. "Because even now, Rome stands on the backs of women who love quietly." Marcia sighed. "And endure endlessly." Livia continued. "These first women had no marble roads, no statues, no recorded history. But they had each other. And when they spoke, the earth listened." Oralia whispered, "And it remembers." Livia nodded. "The earth remembers everything women do in silence." A breeze fluttered the flame of the oil lamp. The courtyard shadows shifted, stretching long and soft across the walls. Livia looked at the children. Every night, these ancient women called the stars their sisters. They told their daughters, "As long as the stars shine, you will never be alone." The older daughter leaned her head on Livia's arm. "Are the stars our sisters too?" "Yes," Livia whispered, kissing her hair. "They always have been." Flavia wiped at her eyes quietly. Oralia clutched her sash closer. Marcia rested her hand over her heart. The courtyard was silent. Not empty silence. Full silence. Silence that felt like a warm blanket wrapping around every breath. Flavia broke it softly. "These last days, I feel like something inside me is healing." Oralia nodded. "Me too. I don't feel afraid when I'm with you all." Marcia added, "Fear melts when women sit together." Livia looked at them, her voice warm and steady. "You are stronger than you know. And Rome is better because you live in it." Oralia's voice trembled. "You think so?" "I know so," Livia said. The oil lamp flickered. The moon rose bright, full, hanging perfectly over the rooftops. A cool breeze swept through the courtyard, lifting the edges of Oralia's sash, swaying the herb leaves, brushing through the children's hair. Something about the moment felt sacred. Not in a temple way. but in a human way. Livia whispered. Close your eyes, listen. The women obeyed. The night breathed around them. Distant footsteps. A soft laugh from a neighbor's house. The quiet hum of insects. The gentle flap of a bird settling in for sleep. The slow, steady heartbeat of Rome. After a moment, Livia said, "This is what safety feels like. Not guards at the gates. Not high walls. Not power. But this. Women together. Breathing the same night. Sharing the same quiet." Flavia whispered, "It feels like home." Orlia murmured, "It feels like we are seen." Marcia finished softly, "It feels like we belong." The moon brightened. The lamp glowed. The courtyard held them as softly as a mother holds a child. Livia looked around at the faces she loved. Orlia's hopeful eyes. Flavia's gentle strength. Marcia's seasoned wisdom. Her daughter's steady breathing. And she felt a fullness rise inside her. A fullness made of gratitude. And peace. And the knowledge that even if no scroll ever wrote their names, Rome would always carry their stories in its walls. She whispered the last line to close the night. "This city sleeps because we do." And with that, the flame flickered once, then steadied. As the women rested together in the heart of a city that breathed with them,